Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to another podcast. Today, I want to share kind of what we could call a deep meditation / vision / astral plane encounter / I don't really know how to classify it, but first and foremost, I think a little background. We have talked about the pyramids. We are still in Egypt. When I was 18 and I completed college, remember in Denmark, the education system is different than it is in the States. So I'm just, for your convenience, call it college, which in Denmark actually is university. But again, between the age of 17 and 18, after I had finished primary school, went out of 10th grade, took a year off, then went back to school. And that part of extra education is what you would classify as college, and that is what gives you access to go to university. Anyway, so I completed my history thesis in Egyptology, where I was talking about Egypt and some of the gods and the pharaohs. And anyways, point being, I made some odd studies about it when I was at that age. Why did I pick that topic? Actually, because I had a series of dreams when I was around that age where I saw myself as part of. It didn't look like Egypt, and I always kind of attributed it to, well, it's probably because dream state, whatnot. Dreams are weird, right? So some is accurate and some is not. But there were layers of information where I'm just kind of, I had not encountered in movies. Where would it then come from, right? So, and remember back then when I was 18, there was no internet as we have it today. That came later on in the 90s. And we're here talking about in the 80s. So that came later on. So this is the big question when we kind of say, okay, I have dreams that holds information that I have not studied, that I have not encountered. And how the beep do that then get into my subconscious? Right? And that's where those of us who have a little bit more to investigate, or more, what do you call it, eagerness or willingness or openness to encounter the other dimensional aspect of reality. And there we discover that there are many different layers. And aside from our psychological emotional field, we have the subconscious, which Carl Gustav Jung talked a lot about, the subconscious. And that brought us into the collective subconscious. And he talked about how myths and mythology and gods and appearances across cultures worldwide, when people began to go into deeper contemplative states, would encounter mythologies from other cultures. So he was already investigating this interesting thing that we could potentially have access to other types of mythology that stem from cultures outside our current native state where we are born. Now, he stopped there. I know from Carl Gustav Jung's self-biography that his sister was a medium. She could connect to spirits, and his childhood home was had poltergeist experiences and events. So he definitely had a different access to information that he not always incorporated in his psychological ideas, but he was trying to find solutions to what he had encountered. And that's kind of all we can do. We have encounters, we see things, we experience things that falls outside the current paradigm of what we interpret reality to be. And then there are the pioneers that try to figure out, okay, what is it? Asking the right questions and investigating it and going beyond what is normally accepted within general science. Someone has to go first, right? But if one can, more can follow. So, and that goes for both good and ill. So we'll do it for good. Anyways, the interesting thing with these dreams was, even though at already at that time, I was looking into the collective subconscious, and I kind of decided, well, that's probably something like that. So I took that for granted, but still I investigated further and made a history assignment on Egypt, and not that I came to any grand conclusions, because that was not the point of the assignment, but the whole point was that I looked into it. So that's part of my luggage, so to speak. I have furthermore encountered Egypt, or Mitzrayim, as it's called in ancient Hebrew, and that I came across when I did my bachelor degree in theology at the University of Copenhagen, because parts of the tribes of Israel, the Jacobian tribe, came from Egypt, or they migrated to Egypt and became part of that group that migrated back with or under the guardians of Moses, whether that story is true or not. Either way, it doesn't really matter. It's at the time, as we know, those of us who have studied it on our scholar level can easily agree on that quite a lot of the stories, both in the Bible as well as in other accounts or from the time, including even if we read Plato or anyone else, parts of it would be historically known, and then they would add in their personal perspective of it, as in the different. For instance, when Plato talks about Atlantis, he states he begins the account by saying that he has got this from actually an Egyptian sage that had it from someone else as part of their lineage, priesthood lineages, talking about this advanced civilization that, due to hybris and due to wrongful use of energy and consciousness, not that that's the word they use, but that's the word I use, sunk into the ocean. Whatever that means, was that actually a physical event, or was it an energetic event? And there are a lot of things that we can dive into later on, just to throw in there. When I visited Grand Canyon this time around, when I was in the States, I could see that Grand Canyon used to be a large ocean, and there used to be civilizations living there that were transferred into another dimension, including the ocean. So this is again technology that we are not aware of that is possible, and that is for us to re-encounter and learn yet again when we go deeper into the understanding of the true nature of our reality, when we look at it from a multidimensional perspective. So with that background, you kind of see, okay, I already have some tools, I already have some insights, I already have some ideas. And in this vision I want to talk about is actually described in the Book of the Dead, in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, not the Tibetan, but the Egyptian. And that is all about what happens when you die. I have not studied it first and foremost in Egyptian, which you should rightfully, and not the Greek translation, because whenever something is translated from one language into another, the translator often takes certain freedoms, and it goes within specific paradigms of how this word interpreted. Similarly, when I did my bachelor degree in theology, I studied the ancient Bible, the Torah, in its original language, Hebrew, but the translation had to be done under the tools and the paradigms and the agreement within the scholastic community that this is how we translate it. Or if you go to old suttas within the Tripitaka or the Buddhist text material, it's written in Pali. That is also, it's not an invented language, that would be wrong to say, but it's a sacred language, and that meant that it was for the priesthood. So they might interpret it in a specific way. They would only use these words as contemplation points, as words that would lead to a thought process, that would lead to a thought form. So the suttas were there because there was this old secret knowledge. When we talk about ancient text, it is always interpreted on 3 levels, minimum three levels. The literal interpretation, and that's typically where most people go wrong, and that's why the fanatics say, but the text says this. And then they begin to go and segregate and interpret in different ways. And that's why Christianity has all of these branches, and Buddhism has all of these branches, and Hinduism has all of these branches. Any religion has a lot of branches because people interpret the text literally. And then since these ancient texts were deliberately written to confuse and not give the full picture, then you see you're already there opening up for all of these disputes of how the text is to be interpreted. So what's the point of that? The point of is that when you are a priest, or when you are a seeker, or when you're a mystic, when you look at these texts, you are to contemplate on. In the Hebrew Bible, you use the Kabbalah or the Tree of Life. That's later on developed, but it actually has some very ancient roots, which some scholars have worked with. And I have talked a little bit about that in the booklet I have made, The Tree of Life. So I put some ideas in there. So if you want to follow that line of thought, you can look into there. It's not scientifically, quote unquote, proven that the Tree of Life goes back to both Egypt as well as Sumeria, but they both have trees of life, and they both have a snake at the bottom of the Tree of Life. And we have that in the Hebrew Bible as well. And we know the Hebrew Bible has roots both from Egypt as well as Babylonia. So put things together, but science have to work with the data, and science have to work with what is available of sources that confirms these ideas. Until that, it's just ideas and hypotheses, and since it cannot be proven, then it cannot be deemed that this is how it is. But it's still an interesting idea to work with, just so we kind of understand the scientific approach, why they can't always say something conclusively, because they simply don't have the evidence. So if the evidence has been burned and removed or deteriorated, well, they will have gap in the sciences where they can make an idea or a hypothesis that this is perhaps how it could be, but we cannot say conclusively, which kind of sucks a little bit. But it opens up for interpretation if the paradigms were open for that broader interpretation system. And that's where science gets a little bit too closed around itself. And I've made a booklet about that as well, how we can open up for a more consciousness-based type of science within the different paradigms and scientific communities. But that's further into the future. So I've written a lot of booklets about all of this if you want to get more insights into this line of thought and get some ideas that might expand your perception of how these things work as things are right now. Okay, so back to the interpretation on three levels. So we have the literal interpretation that is typically put there to throw people off. The seeker knows how to contemplate on the text. That means there are certain ways that these texts are built up. For instance, we take the suttas of the Buddha, and which is they're written later on. These are supposedly the words he said, and they handed over via the monks and then later on written down. Similar like the sayings of Jesus, supposedly his disciples heard his teachings, and then later on they were written down. 100 years later, 200 years later, whatever. And science always says, well, the ones that could recite this, what was said, they were pretty accurate because back then they were good at reciting things and they memorized it. So we can say to a high degree they are accurate. I'm not so sure about that, but that's my personal opinion. Okay, so we also know from the time, and that both goes with Buddhist text or whatever we have, whenever we have a teacher that only teaches things verbally, then we can't really claim that even though it's written down later on, that is actually what that person said. Because there's a reason why it's given verbally. That's another secret about the ancient teachings. So when we hear say the three literal ways, the three ways that it's interpreted the text, when it was written down, some of the text was deliberately made to confuse, and other texts were given hints to recall and remember when you were reciting and contemplating on it. So you got the keys to the thought forms that were behind. And these are kind of a part of the collective consciousness that Carl Gustav Jung talked about. And then there was the third layer, and that's the one where you went so deep in that you would get the actual information. But you had to understand, you had to study the text literally first to understand the text, so you remembered the text and understood what was said there on a physical, aka base program level. Then you would work with it in contemplation, where you would get access to layers of your inner world that would align with the different words that were literally like keys that would open up to different layers of your consciousness, subconscious, your inner expanded awareness. Within that system you were studying, be it the Pali text or the Torah or Confucius or Sarosa, or sorry, I can't remember the philosopher from Iran. That's because my brain doesn't want to go there. But it's similar with all of these different teachers that they have always taught it verbally, and then later on has been written down. And to keep the secrecy and the true nature of these teachings, they had always built in these three layers, and that meant that the seeker, first you study it literally, then you begin to contemplate on to get the deeper understanding, where you begin to experience thought forms behind the teachings, where you, if you're really good at, you can actually connect to some degree, often on the astral plane, unfortunately, which means it's full of distortion. But all of the other ones that's been on the path, what they have figured out, what they have understood, will be part of that path. And then it's up to you to say, either I follow the path of the others that have gone before me and join that community, the inner energetic community on the astral plane, or I move beyond that to the next and third layer, where I begin to investigate the true knowledge behind the text material that I'm actually working with. The book of Enoch, or Henoch, as it's actually correctly pronounced with an H, also gives these, where Henoch goes up to the seventh heaven. And here you get, St. Paul did the same way. He also had visions to the seventh heavens. And you get that 7 heavens. That means there are 7 layers. In Buddhist cosmology, there are 4 layers below the human, then there's the human realm, and then there are a number of layers above that. In total, 31 realms that you can encounter in your inner work. And the text is a kind of a guide to reach these different layers, so you know what to do. Similar with the Book of the Dead in Egyptology, or the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Okay, so now you have that understanding. Forgot to breathe there. So with that understanding, there are these, so when I say a vision, it's not actually accurate, but it appears so. If for lack of better word, we could call it that. We could also call it an entry point into a certain level of the astral plane that has been triggered, either by an energetic encounter or by the fact that I did remote viewing on the pyramids, meaning that I began to activate a specific path within the holographic energetic realms, aka the different planes or realms of existence that are part of our first individual field that goes into many, many different layers. Let's just say 21 layers for the sake of, that's the esoterics work with, that when we begin to develop our inner structure, there are 21 layers of energy and consciousness that must be worked through and understood. There are other divisions, all depending on which structure, which teaching system that you dive into. And I've said that we need to move beyond these old teaching systems, but to be able to let something go, in essence, we actually have to understand how it works, right? So this is me just throwing a little bit here and there, so you get, okay, there are certain ideas that might not have been presented out there, but yeah. Okay, so the vision thing, the entering into different aspects of reality has been part of my entire life, even as a child. So for me, it's quite natural that I go into theta state, I relax, I lie down, I relax, I don't fall asleep, I go into theta state, and then I get pushed into the subconscious, and then if there's something I need to investigate, then it will naturally pop up, because this is part of when you really begin to work with the inner levels of your fields, similar when you do psychological work. Remember, I'm a psychotherapist. So when you work with your subconscious or your psychological structure, the psyche itself will push what needs to be worked with at the right time, at the right moment, when you're ready to work with it. Until then, the psyche will protect you as you already did as a child, protective mechanisms called defense mechanisms and other things to protect so that so the ego would be functional in the world as it is. And everything that didn't fit the current environment, the dynamics, the patterns of the psychodynamics you were a part of would then be put into boxes and put dormant and stowed away so it wouldn't interfere you in your everyday life, because for some odd reason, the ego wants to present itself in a specific way inside the world, which is also why Buddhist ideas work with, or the original ideologies or ideas of the Buddha was to work with the ego structure and make it permeable, make it transformable, because the energies that are part of are always transforming. So if the ego is rigid and stick on and cling on to certain belief systems and ideas and thought processes and emotional processes, well, then it will only interpret one level of reality. The ego needs to be flexible and changeable and act as an intermediary between your current version of who and what you are and how you perceive yourself, your self-identification, and transform that into be ready and eager and willing to investigate whatever comes your way in meditation and deeper contemplative states that goes through different layers, which are called jhanas and all these things. But this is not where I want to go. But it just shows that when we talk about systems that are already there, there's been people working with this for a very, very, very long time. And so it's not something that's just popping up in our everyday. We say, oh, new age is new. No, it's not. It's not new age. It's old age. It's old information. We're just rebranding it. So that's also part of understanding that we step into the path of those who've gone before us. And we choose if we want to join the community on the different astral planes, of which some actually has not moved on yet, are still there in their what we would call emotional, mental version of themselves on the astral plane, lingering on there, talking about clinging on instead of letting go and moving on to whatever realm they're supposed to move on to. There we can say definitely some of the sutras within the Theravada text material definitely shows how different approaches inside this lifetime and different ways of working with our inner self, so to speak, the scanners, the energy fields we are made of, and the readiness to let go of what we are experiencing this life and harmonize and reach balance point in all of the endeavors and the actions and the choices that we make, well, then we can move into other realms afterwards. So that's already written about in the sutras some 2,000 years ago. So we already have that as kind of quote unquote evidence of contemplators and meditators, seekers that had reached this understanding, including the Book of Enoch and St. Paul's, to mention a few, that talks about entering into these different realms where they get information about the true nature of reality, and all depending on the corpus of investigative methods, the brain capacity, the level of education, the way that these visions, these encounters are interpreted, then either interpreted as super religious, as St. Paul did, oh, this is Jesus. And I would say, yeah, you probably encountered a vision of a Niburian, but it's okay. St. Paul is no longer here, so what does he know? He didn't know about extraterrestrials at the time, right? So, just my interpretation. And other similar things, John Smith, the Mormons, he had these encounters with some angels and Jesus, and I would again say, most likely probably visions of energetic encounters with Pleiadians. So these are the signatures I get when I look at the text and the text material he got. And he, again, because he was Christian, interpreted it within Christianity and onward and so forth. So we have this. For us that are interpreting these texts and visions and whatever we are, it's important that we keep an open mind and not tailor it and downsize it to fit our already existing belief systems. Because one of the point of visions, the visions are not there to confirm what you already know. The visions are there to break free of what you already know, to literally push the ego structure into an open-mindedness to investigate and to understand I am little insignificant in the great scheme of things, and to teach us how to be humble. So that's the first very important esoteric lesson, that when you get visions, it's not about pumping up your ego, I'm so and so good. It's actually the complete opposite, because the visions are there to break down your ego so that it understands its rightful place, its rightful context, and how it can, with humbleness and with humility in a good, positive way, learn to use and access the different layers of reality from the standpoint of being the student, from the standpoint of being in a position of learning, and from the standpoint of being in what we could say an open understanding where actually I don't know much. I'm here to learn, and the more I learn, the more I understand that I know absolutely nothing about this reality. And that's where wisdom begins to grow. So the contemplation is not to gain powers as we see it in the Middle Age interpretation of the Kabbalah, using sigils and magic and blah, 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 and calling in the archangels and whatnot, which they weren't. But let's just say that was for personal gain of power. But you see, to get to the point where you really access the deeper layers of what reality is the one that has the pure heart. And the pure heart means that you go as an infant, you go with the naive mindset of a child that just explores for the sake of exploration, that goes on the adventure for the sake of the adventure, to learn and to gain wisdom. Wisdom is the true gold of all inner work. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is the correct use of energy and the correct use of consciousness. The ego knows its place within the whole scheme of what you are, and you understand that this is just part of a very, very long journey of many, many lifetimes of which you are sojourning, and you are here to mature and unfold the higher order capacities that builds the energetic, genetic, consciousness structure that allows you to traverse the different realms of existence for the highest good of the many. So that's technically my interpretation of wisdom. Okay, so with that one in place, to the vision. And that's going to be 5 minutes. A kort vision. A short vision, not a kort. That was Danish word. Kort means short. No, a short vision explanation, because it kind of came as I was contemplating on the vision afterwards. So what was the vision? Well, technically, it was a vision you get when you die. So that's interesting. So first and foremost, framework, it is the Book of Dead, the Egyptian Book of Dead. And in the Egyptian Book of Dead, when you die, you go to a specific realm where Anubis is present. And there are other deities there as well, but I just kind of got the standard Egyptian deities. There was the Makara, that's the one with the crocodile head, and there were Anubis, and then there were some bird, the falcon beings. They have, male body, but they have animal heads typically depicted. So there are some of these underworld gods that you encounter when you get there. And then you have the scale. The scale is also often shown as you have the human heart that is weighed on one of the scales, and the other one, there is a feather, a white feather. Now, when I went into that scenario, it was clear that I was dead. And that version of me, whether it's a past life recall of a death moment, or it's stepping into an astral vision, or it's some other things that needs my attention, or it could be an interception, it could be 1,000 things. But I'm like a child, I go there. We know from the Gospels, those who will enter into the kingdom of heaven must have the mind or the heart and the mind of a child, so you can be reborn, right? So and this is one of the, from the Gospel of John, when Nicodemus says, how can you be reborn again? You've already been born. You cannot go back into your mother's womb and be reborn. These old discussions. So that's the literal understanding. But reborn means that you kind of you enter into another realm where everything you are will be recalibrated, so to speak, to be able to access the other worlds where you get birth into these worlds. And that's why you get birth by water and spirit, or as it's said. And spirit is often associated with fire, and fire esoterically means that you work on the mental plane, where you transform the mental plane, you begin the transformation. And water is typically associated with the emotional field. So you begin to understand all of these kind of things, how these are the key words to understand the deeper understandings of some of the astral plane encounters, which are, if you follow the esoteric teaching system, these are initiations. So a death is technically an initiation from one state of existence into another, either to the underworld or into one of the seven heavens. So you go through these, in Christianity, we call it going to the gates of St. Peter's, and he will then weigh you whether you go to heaven or to hell, right? So mythology everywhere is based upon this idea that when you die, you go somewhere else. But you have to go through some kind of trial, which is the scale, that's a trial, or you have to go through in front of an angel that will look into your lives and look into the books and the scrolls of what you have done and say, yeah, didn't go so well. Or you meet Santa Claus, whatever. No, that was just a bad joke. But the whole point is that when we enter into the different realms, we have to go through initiation to be able to do so. When I was working with some of the other realms of within the path of the Theravada teachings, there were the 33 Buddhas that I had to encounter. They put me on different tests. These are all holographic tests. So that's an initiation. So that happens on the inner planes. It's not something that happens outside. And anyone who says, oh, I can perform an initiation because I am a representative, I am the high priest of this and this and this and this and whatever, it's just kind of, yeah, probably not, because the true initiations always unfold on the inner planes of existence, and never through a human that puts on a robe and puts a cross in her or his or her hand or whatever they do and call themselves a priest, and they are the speaker and the spokespersons for this or whatever deity. These are the Baals and some of the factions that, not so interested. So the true initiations have always been happening in secret. So that's part of that one. And no, it's nothing to do with all of these skull and bones and what have you and whatnot. These are all the distorted, man-made, highly dysfunctional humans that are making these societies because they can't reach the true initiations that are energetic, that expands and elevates you into higher levels of perception and higher levels of understanding of reality. That only comes with the ones that are pure at heart. And making all sorts of weird rituals does not make you pure at heart. That makes you ambitious. That makes you someone who wants to gain something by give something. And in that whole aspect of selling off to gain something, you are kind of making deals with some other parts of our reality. And that might give you power, but that's not the correct use of energy and consciousness, at least not in my opinion. But those who choose that, well, they will probably say that's their path, and so be it, and they can go their path and we go our path, and that's all good and fine. That's their choice, and they are free to choose so, and we are free to choose our own path. So when we go to these initiations and these gates where our heart will be weighed for its purity rate, because that's what it's about. It's not your deeds are a symbolic representation of your purity rate. So your words, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions shows the state, the energetic state of your heart. And that's what's being weighed. So even though it's in the depiction is always the physical heart that they show on the scale, it is not because when you're dead, you don't have a physical heart, but you have an energetic heart. And that's the one that's being weighed. And that's why if it is pure, it will weigh nothing. You know the saying, the heart is heavy with shame, or it's heavy with sorrow, or whatever it is. So that means it's energetically contracted. It becomes more dense. It is not, as you know, a joyful heart expands, energy bursts from it as an emission, or purity, the kindness of a person will blast out and emit a specific radiation. The more kindness and the more wisdom a heart is capable of holding, that means the correct use of energy and consciousness, the lighter it becomes, the higher vibrant it becomes. And that's what's being weighed. And the interesting thing was, once I discovered or realized that in the vision, from both the Makara and the Anubian representation of what Anubis, whatever that was, then the dog star, remember, Anubis is technically a dog. Some says, oh, it's a shackle, but it is a dog. And it's interesting because Sirius has a very, very close connection to Egypt. So if we say the Anubian version, or Anubis, is not a shackle, but actually a dog, then you begin to understand that these are something that are connected to the ancient Syrian Ace. And the Syrian Ace are the big factions behind most of the inner realm initiation processes. So there you begin to, now it begins to add up these understanding of what's actually going on. But once I realized that, then Anubis changed from this black-headed dog into a golden dog that then, interestingly enough, began to grow wings. And we know Anubis does not have wings, but that wings are a representation of fire and a representation of higher energies, a representation of transformation. And then Anubis transformed into a bowl, a sphere of light, and dissipated. And Makara did the same thing. Makara has a very significant feature in some of the esoteric teachings, and we'll just leave it at that, because the crocodile, that's reptoid, and that's a representation of reptoid genetics, and we'll just leave that where Anubis is representation of mammal genetics, then turns into avian genetics, and then turn into a sphere that means pure energy and consciousness, and then dissipates. And then the Makara did the same thing and dissipated there, but actually turned into kind of a flaming staff, which was interesting. And then I had the sphere of energy, and I had the staff. And then, because of my purity of my heart, I could then take the sphere in my left hand and the staff in my right hand. So these are now two tools that I have achieved in this initiation. With these two tools, I now need, as it typically goes when you're entering into a new realm, to understand some of the secrets that are buried behind all of these ancient structures. You have to go through the initiations to understand the true knowledge behind these structures. I need to go through several tests that will present themselves, and there I will have to use the staff and the sphere that I have transformed by having the correct genetic lineage. And my heart is pure enough, and I'm wise enough to deal with these things, so that when I go to the next vision, that probably will be some kind of gate, some kind of emerald, diamond type of gate, I will get another test, I will get another riddle that I will then have to solve with the two tools that I've now got: a sphere, an Nubian sphere that is purified, and it can dissipate, but I'm holding it very slightly. It's kind of a fire thing. And then I have the reptoid genetics and the staff that's also fire. So that's two transformational tools. So we will see what the next vision will be. Point being is this little secrets from beyond is that these are some of the ancient teachings that always went with the ones that were seeking the true nature of our reality. But they had to go through these initiations on the astral plane. And this is not the real deal, but these are the prelude before you get access to the true realms of our reality. The astral plane is also the distortion plane, so people can get lost there. And that's why it's typically said when you go through the astral plane, there are different valleys you have to go through before you get to the true initiations. So if we talk about the Egyptian Book of the Dead, is it really made for the dead? Or is it, again, 3 layers: 1 layer for the dead, two layers are for the ones that undergo these transformational processes where the ego structure technically dies, but portions move on, and by that reflect back as a feedback loop and transform the personality while we are still alive, but a version of us has technically died and no longer exists, so that we can move on through these different inner planes of existence from where we can modify, upgrade, develop our holographic energetic structure through these different initiations. Why are they put there? Well, they're part of the Brotherhood teachings, of course. But the Brotherhoods, some of them were secret sub-organizations that kept some of this knowledge intact within certain groups to show how you could get out of the colonizing contracts that were put upon the solar system, humanity. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk about the book of Genesis and Exodus is all about liberation from enslavement in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. Or we talk about the Buddhist path of liberation, and we talk about enlightenment so that we can liberate ourselves from rebirth. You see, now begin things to put together. So with that level of information, it's a little bit everywhere, and it could definitely be done in a more systemic or systematic way. But for now, I've given you enough things to contemplate upon. Take it as a seed idea. I'm seeding something, and then see how you can apply some of these ideas to some of your own inner journeys and what you're exploring and what you are trying to find head or tail in your own quote-unquote spiritual work to get on the true path of liberation that goes with the ancient teaching systems. Of course, there's a lot of distortion. And just to throw the last thing in there, tarot cards and other types of physical tools are just physical tools, and they are connected to the physical form. The true awakening process is always energetic, and it happens through contemplation, experiences from the other side, the other realms of reality, and how you navigate, how the choices you make, how you respond, how you solve the riddles, and how you get through the different challenges that will present themselves to you will all determine whether or not you will follow the path of the teaching system that you engage in. And if you do it the right way, that's also why it's called a path, then the path itself will show you what the next steps are and what you need to do. You will solve the riddles, you will be on a quest, and you will learn how to deal with these challenges. And if you sort them the right way, as has always been with these ancient teachings and the secret teachings, then you will get the knowledge that will allow you to step into a new realm where you will go through different initiations to get the full understanding of what that realm is all about. And you will have a lot of different encounters. The goal is not the encounters. The goal is with this wisdom, this knowledge, you can recalibrate and restructure your original solar system holographic energetic architecture, because you have gone through the trials, you have gone through the initiations, you have passed the tests, and you have proven again and again that your orientation is not towards the physical world, but towards the true realms of true consciousness and what it means to be a true solar system human. So, thank you for listening in, and until next time, take care.